Something brought you here today. Not an algorithm, not a random click. Something deeper. Something you might not even have a word for yet. Just a feeling. A quiet pull in the center of your chest that says, pay attention. So before you scroll past, before you convince yourself this isn't for you, just stay. Because what you're about to hear might be exactly what you've been waiting to hear. And you may not even realize you've been waiting. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you felt like yourself? Not the version of you that shows up to work, or texts back quickly, or smiles on cue, but the real you. The version of you that exists before the stress hits in the morning, before the anxiety crawls back in, before you start wondering if you're doing enough, being enough, worth enough. If you're struggling to remember, that's exactly why this message found you. Because there is something happening right now, inside you, that is bigger than your circumstances. Bigger than your bank account, your relationship status, your job title, your past mistakes. And the fact that you haven't been able to name it yet doesn't mean it isn't real. It is real, and it is about to become clear. There is a verse in the Bible, one that billions of people across thousands of years have returned to in their darkest and most uncertain moments. It comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11. And it says this, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now, if you've heard that before, I want you to hear it differently today. Not as a bumper sticker, not as something someone posts when they don't know what else to say, but as a direct, personal statement spoken to you about your life right now, in this moment. Let's break it down. I know the plans I have for you. Not I think. Not I hope. I know. There is certainty in that word that most of us have never felt about our own lives. We live in a constant state of uncertainty about our careers, about our relationships, about whether the choices we've made are leading somewhere meaningful. But this verse says there is a force, a creator, a God, who isn't guessing, who already knows. And notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say the plans are easy. It doesn't say there won't be hard seasons. It says plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Meaning, even in the painful chapters, even in the confusion, even in the waiting, the direction is forward. The intention is good. Plans to give you hope and a future. Not just survival. Hope. Not just getting through the day. A future. Something ahead of you that is worth moving toward. Now here's where this gets personal. Because most of us in America right now, and I mean this with full sincerity, are exhausted. Not just physically tired. Soul tired. We are living in a culture that never stops demanding. Hustle harder. Look better. Post more. Earn more. Compare yourself to the person next to you. And then compare yourself to the highlight reel on your phone. And then wonder why you still feel empty at the end of the day. We've normalized anxiety. We've accepted stress as a personality trait. We scroll through our phones at 2 in the morning because sleeping feels harder than numbing. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, in the traffic and the debt and the arguments and the loneliness, we've quietly stopped believing that anything extraordinary is still possible for us. Not for other people. Maybe for other people, but not for us. And that quiet surrender, is what this message is here to interrupt. Think about where you are right now in your life. Not where you thought you'd be, where you actually are. Maybe you're in a job that pays the bills, but hollows you out. You went to college, you did everything you were supposed to do, and somehow you ended up sitting under fluorescent lights in a building that has nothing to do with who you actually are. And you keep telling yourself it's temporary, but the years keep passing and temporary starts to feel permanent. Or maybe it's a relationship. Something that used to feel like home, but now feels more like a habit. Or the absence of a relationship That particular kind of loneliness that is hardest to explain because it doesn't look like loneliness from the outside. You're surrounded by people. You're not alone. But somehow you've never felt more invisible. Or maybe you're in that dark corridor between who you were and who you're supposed to become. And you have no idea how long the corridor is, no idea what's at the end of it. And some days the uncertainty alone is enough to make you want to turn back. Whatever brought you here today, that's where this verse meets you. Here's the thing about Jeremiah 29 verse 11 that most people don't know. It wasn't written to a person sitting in comfort. It wasn't a motivational quote for someone having a good week. It was written to an entire nation that had been exiled, torn from their homes, separated from everything familiar, forced into Babylon, a foreign land, a strange culture, a painful displacement that many of them believed was the end of their story. And into that suffering, into that confusion and grief and loss of identity, God speaks and says, I know the plans I have for you. Not, your situation isn't that bad. Not, look on the bright side. But a real acknowledgement of where they were, paired with an unshakable declaration of where they were going. Which means this verse was written for hard times. It was written for exactly the kind of moment you might be in right now. And here's the part that changes everything. Just before this famous verse, in verse 10, the text says that the people had to wait 70 years in Babylon before the promise came to pass. 70 years. That's not a quick fix. That's not an overnight transformation. That's a long wait. And God knew about it. And he still said, I have a plan. It is good. Hold on. So let me ask you again, differently this time. What if the waiting you're in right now isn't punishment? What if it isn't proof that you failed, or that God forgot about you, or that the best parts of your life are already behind you? What if the waiting is the preparation? What if every hard job you've pushed through was building a resilience that your destiny requires? What if every relationship that didn't work was protecting you from something that would have destroyed you? What if every night you cried into the silence and couldn't explain why? What if those were the moments where the deepest, most important parts of you were being quietly, carefully shaped? Because that's how transformation actually works. It doesn't happen on the mountaintop. It happens in the valley. It happens in the hallway between doors. It happens in the middle of ordinary Tuesday mornings when nothing looks like it's changing, and yet, beneath the surface, everything is. There's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It's the documented, scientifically observed phenomenon where people who have gone through significant suffering, loss, trauma, failure, grief, come out the other side not just recovered, but transformed. More empathetic, more clear about what matters, more connected to purpose, more alive, not despite the hardship, because of it. Now that doesn't mean pain is something to chase, or that suffering is somehow required for meaning. But it does mean that your story is not ruined by what has happened to you. In fact, the very things you're most ashamed of, most exhausted by, most desperate to escape, those might be the exact chapters that make the rest of your life make sense. The Jeremiah verse doesn't erase the exile. It reframes it. It says, there is a larger story being written here, and you are not the author. You are the character, and the author knows the ending. Now I want to speak to the person who's lost their faith. Maybe you grew up in church and drifted away. Maybe you've prayed before and it felt like it went nowhere, like speaking into an empty room. Maybe you've been disappointed one too many times to extend trust in any direction, including upward. I'm not here to sell you a religion. I'm not asking you to suddenly believe everything you've doubted. But I am asking you to consider one thing. What if the thing you've been searching for, the thing underneath the ambition, underneath the anxiety, underneath the relationships you keep trying to fix, what if it's not something you can earn or achieve or acquire? What if it's something that has to be received? Because that's what this verse is ultimately. It's not a formula. It's not a self-improvement checklist. It's an invitation to release the illusion of total control, to stop white-knuckling every outcome, to acknowledge, even if it's scary to admit, that maybe you were not designed to carry all of this alone. And that's not weakness. That's the beginning of something. So how do you actually live this? How do you take a verse written thousands of years ago and make it mean something on a Wednesday morning when your alarm goes off and your stomach immediately fills with dread? Here's what I think it looks like in practice. It looks like catching yourself in the spiral, the overthinking, the catastrophizing, the comparison, and saying out loud, even if you don't fully believe it yet, this is not the end of my story. Say it like a fact. Say it before your feelings agree. It looks like choosing one small, faithful action today instead of waiting until everything feels figured out. Purpose doesn't usually announce itself. It reveals itself to people who are already in motion. You start moving toward what resonates with something real inside you, and the path begins to clarify under your feet. It looks like being honest about what you've been avoiding, the conversation you keep putting off, the dream you filed under maybe someday, the apology, the decision, the boundary, the beginning. Whatever it is, the fact that you keep circling back to it is not an accident. Pay attention to what you keep returning to. That's usually a signal. It looks like being patient with yourself in a way you would never deny to a friend. You would not look at someone you love going through what you're going through and tell them they should have it all figured out by now. So stop saying that to yourself. And it looks like staying open. Open to the idea that good things are still coming. Open to the idea that the best of your life is not behind you. Open to the possibility that what feels like the end of something might actually be the clearing that something new requires. Before this ends, I want you to do one thing. Just for a moment, set down the weight. Not forever, just for right now. Set down the fear that you're too far behind. Set down the shame about how you got here. Set down the exhaustion of performing okayness when you're not okay. Set down the version of yourself you've been dragging around trying to improve, fix, optimize, and apologize for. Just breathe and let yourself hear this one more time. Not as a religious text, not as a quote on a wall, but as a message meant specifically for you. Today, in the exact life you're actually living, there is someone who knows the plans for your life. Those plans are to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope and a future. You are not an accident. You are not a mistake. You are not too broken, too late, too far gone, or too ordinary for something extraordinary to happen inside and through your life. You didn't find this video. This video found you. And maybe that's the first evidence, the first small, quiet proof that the author of your story isn't finished writing. Hold on. Move forward. Stay open. And whatever you do, don't you dare give up right before the part where everything changes. Maybe this message found you for a reason.